So we are here tonight to honor Bryan Norton, a remarkable Kansas golfer we recognize for his career as an amateur golfer. He's played in events across the state, the country, and the world, finding himself in many winner's circles. Raised in Salina, Kansas, Bryan started golf playing at the young age of 6 years old when his parents bought a house quite next to Salina Country Club. He studied the game under Salina Country Club's then head golf professional, Wally Beats. Wally taught both Bryan and fellow Salina Central High School teammate Randy Searing. In a 1993 Salina Journal article titled "The Golden Child," referring to Bryan, Randy was quoted talking about a 1974 high school golf tournament at Cary Park in Hutchinson. Randy said, "Most of the good golfers had shot in the 70s and were standing around feeling pretty good. Then Bryan comes in and turns in a 66. That was the day that we realized that this kid was cut from a different cloth." Both Wally and Randy have since been inducted into the Kansas Golf Hall of Fame, and now Bryan shares that with them. Bryan went on to play at Oral Roberts University in Tulsa alongside later PGA Tour players Bill Glasson, Joe Rassett, and fellow All-American Jim Kane. Bryan helped lead his team to second and third place in the 1980 and 81 NCAA championships, while taking fourth individually in 1980, earning MVP against Japan, and being a recognized All-American for both those years. Some of those guys wish they could have been here tonight, Bryan.
Hey, Torch. I guess before I go any further, I should probably explain to everybody why I refer to you as Torch. Well, back in our college days at Oral Roberts University, Bryan had a wee little too much to drink one night. There was a plastic trash can located adjacent to the entry door back into the dorm. And for some reason, Bryan wanted to know if you lit the trash can, would it melt? Well, Fire Marshal Norton lit the trash can, and oh yeah, it melted. But before it melted, it lit up like a Christmas tree. Since then, we have always referred to him as Torch. But on a serious note, Bryan was a phenomenal teammate. He was always very positive. He never complained. He worked extremely hard on his game, and it paid off because Bryan became a better player every year. And quite frankly, Bryan made me a better player too. Now, I've got all kinds of memories and stories about Bryan, but the one that first comes to mind is when your mom and dad hosted us up in Salina, Kansas for a few days back in the fall of 1980. It was the most fun I think I've ever had. We went horseback riding, we went fishing, we shot skeet, we played golf at Salina Country Club, which was when I first met the great Randy Searing. I've treasured that trip for over 4 decades. Bryan, congratulations on your induction. Extremely well deserved. You've accumulated a Hall of Fame record, all the while building a successful business and raising a wonderful family. Now, I know that your family must be immensely proud of you this evening, and I also know that your dad is smiling down upon you. So without further ado, cheers, Torch, and have a great evening.
Hey, Bryan, congratulations from sunny Florida. Being inducted into the Kansas Hall of Fame after 4 decades. I didn't know they had that many athletes in Kansas that deserved that title, and especially in golf. With that being said, Torch, I can't tell you how much your desire, your determination, your dedication, and your hard work benefited all of us. We fed off each other, we bonded with each other, and today we're still friends. Couldn't congratulate you more. whether it be lighting a dumpster or relieving yourself of a constipation issue. All I can say is well-deserved, great tribute to you and your ability as an amateur golfer, a professional golfer, and a senior amateur golfer. And by the way, you were the studious one. So again, congratulations, my friend.
Bryan Norton, congratulations on being inducted to the Kansas Golf Hall of Fame. Very deserving and special guy. You were a dream for a golf coach. You were a 3.8 student, took care of business with your classroom, and that was very important. Also, your golf skills, they got better every year. And the interesting thing was between your sophomore and junior year, you came back from playing a major amateur tournaments. And you came in and sat down with me and said, "Hey, coach, I'm as good as anybody else in the country." That led you on to finishing fourth into the NCAA that year at Ohio State, making All-American and all that on the great team. And you were one of the great contributors of that team. You're special to me. Wish you the best, and congratulations again.
Bryan has played KGA and Central Links golf tournaments for the past 4 decades. As a 3-time winner of the Kansas Amateur Championship, Bryan took his first win at the ripe age of 21 in 1980. The 2002 Kansas Am took place at Tallgrass Country Club. Bryan was 1 down going into the final hole against Wichita's Jonathan May. From the water hazard, Bryan proceeded to hole out his 3rd shot for birdie to push to a playoff. Bryan taking the title after Jonathan's bogey on the first extra hole. 12 years later, at the age of 55, Bryan not only took the title again, but also became the oldest champion of the Kansas Amateur, shattering an 80-year record set in 1934 by Jack Robertson, who was 45 years old. So you got 10 years on him. Congrats. As a senior, Bryan took trophies at the Kansas Senior Am as champion in 2010, 2011, and 2018. And he also won this year's Kansas Senior Series Championship.
Bryan, on behalf of the Central Links Golf staff and board of directors, congratulations on your induction into the Kansas Golf Hall of Fame. You've been both a great champion in the state of Kansas and a really great representative of Kansas on the national stage for a lot of years. This is a well-deserved honor, and we look forward to seeing you win more championships down the road.
Bryan has also stormed through USGA tournaments, competing in 27 national championships, making the 1981 Walker Cup as an alternate, finishing runner-up in the 2003 Mid-Am and the 2014 Senior Mid-Am. He tied for 19th in the 2009 Senior Open and took individual medalists in the 2010 Men's State Team National Championship, leading his team to victory at Mayakama Golf Club in Santa Rosa, California. Bryan also took titles at Seminole Golf Club in the highly coveted 2014 Coleman Invitational and 2015 Coleman Senior Invitational. He helped the Concession Cup team to victory in 2016 and played on the winning West team in the East-West matches down in Texas at Merido Golf Club in 2020.
Hey Bryan, it's Jimmy Dunn. I'm here at Flint Hills missing you. Congratulations on the Kansas Hall of Fame. It is well earned, and you'll be sitting pretty right next to Tom Watson. You've earned it, you've played your way in there. But one other thing, you know, the greatest amateur, Bobby Jones, he and you shared something characteristic. As good as you were, as better as you were than anybody else, you weren't a golfing snob. You played with everybody, even fools like me, and that's how I met you. So couldn't be happier for you. Wish I was there. I'll be about 40,000 feet over the air right now as you're getting this on my way to California. All the best, brother. See you in Seminole.
Hey, Dad. Hello from a very, rainy and dreary Sydney, Australia. Wanted to send you a quick video to congratulate you on the induction into the Hall of Fame, the Kansas Hall of Fame. That's just such a huge achievement. I wish more than anything I could be there to support you. You've obviously worked so hard over the years, and I'm so proud of you for all that you've, accomplished up to date. And I know there's obviously more to come. I think my favorite memory was definitely the Senior US Open back in 2011 when you went head-to-head with Greg Norman, the Shark, the Australian guy. Seeing you excel at just that level was unbelievable. You played such an amazing round of golf that day, and I know that was a very emotional day for you as well. Just with all the crowds, it was just insane. I'm so proud of you. Wish I could be there. Sending all my love.
So while tonight's award is about Bryan's achievements as an amateur golfer, let us not forget about the 7+ years he played professionally on the European Tour, the PGA Tour, and mini tour circuits, taking home first place more locally at the 1984 Kansas Open and the 1993 Oklahoma Open. Someone who has both competed with and against Bryan over the years is our first speaker, Mike McCoy. Mike is from Des Moines, Iowa. He is a Wichita State Shocker who went on to become a 2-time Trans-Miss champion, 3-time Coleman Invitational champion, and 2013 Mid-Am champion. Mike and Bryan met in Wichita years ago and are both members at Seminole Golf Club and work in the same industry. Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Well, Bryan, on behalf of all your friends around the country, I bring congratulations, and we tip our hats to you, and we'll toast you when we all get together. But what a beautiful evening the Kansas Foundation has put on. You couldn't pack a ballroom for a bad guy. So, I mean, you feel the love in the room. So it's pretty special. And that's how we all feel about Bryan. He, he's one of those guys that's always patting you on the back, bringing you along. And I met Bryan. He probably doesn't even remember. I was playing at Wichita State. We were kind of a middle-of-the-pack team. And he had just finished at Oral Roberts, and they were the studs, and we all looked up to him. And Bryan was taking lessons in Wichita, and he stuck around one day and played golf with us, and that was a good day. And Bryan, gave us some words of wisdom and encouraged us, and that was important back then for a middle-of-the-pack player, and it helped us move along. But Bryan's represented Kansas, all over the country, all over the world, and he's done it with class. And when you see his name on the field, he's going to be one of the guys that you're going to have to beat if you want to win. And we've had a lot of fun together. We all look up to him, and for the insurance guys in the room, I have to say, Bryan, we're in the same industry, and oftentimes we hear all the good players are insurance agents. Well, Bryan was a good player before he was an insurance agent, and it's a credit to him he's still a good player, because it's a very demanding job, and I know that because it's service intensive, and we never know when we're going to be called into action. But anyway, he's had a great career, and we just salute you, and what a great celebration. Congratulations.
Thanks, Mike. So Mike was a surprise. Bryan didn't know that he was going to be here tonight, so it was very special. Bryan says one of his most memorable rounds was in 1990 at the British Open, where he finished 29th and played with Ben Crenshaw in the final round. He also loved his 2009 U.S. Senior Open Saturday and Sunday rounds with Hale Irwin, where he ended up finishing 19th as an amateur. Of all the 18 holes Bryan has played, his best tournament round was in 1984 in a mini tour event in San Diego, where he carded a 10 under 62. And in 1991, just after the U.S. Open, he shot a 61 recreationally here at Kansas City Country Club. Two feats that he owes to his amazing swing coaches over the years. Rob Shipman of Millburn Country Club is here tonight, as is his longtime coach, friend, competitor, teammate, and classmate, Randy Searing. We've heard his name come up several times tonight. Let us welcome him up to the podium to tell his story.
Well, what an honor to be part of this celebration and to have the opportunity to say a few words about Bryan. Selena asked me to be brief. She knows me. So I'll try to do that. There's just so much material. No, I'll be nice. I promise. I decided I'm going to turn over a new leaf. I'm going to be nice tonight. So. In all my golf-related travels over the years, whenever asked where I was from, I found it was easier just to give a two-part answer right up front. I'm from Salina, Kansas, and yes, I know Bryan Norton. Because that was always the next question. I can't tell you the number of times this scenario played out, but it was always, what a great player. And they would know a few of his accomplishments, but I enjoyed those conversations because it gave me an opportunity to enhance the legend in my own words. But that actually happened just recently, talking with a college coach who had played with Bryan on tour and had some wonderful things to say about him. But the one thing that I used the opportunity to let him know is the most telling thing about Bryan is that with all of those championships, all of that success on the golf course, I've heard him say on a number of occasions, his most cherished wins are with his son Johnny and the father-son. That's a lot of what you need to know about Bryan Norton. And then it would go on to what a great guy he is. And of course, I would have to agree, begrudgingly, knowing him all these years, but yes, what a great guy. Bryan always leaves a lasting impression with anyone he plays with because, as already been mentioned, he's a class act on the golf course, regardless of how he's playing. It's usually good, but regardless of how he's playing, you can't really tell how he's playing. He always makes the day special for everybody in his group. But one of the things that I always like to follow up with too is there's so many things that Bryan has done that people don't know about. And I love to mention his leadership with the foundation, what he's done for junior golf in Kansas, the many trips he has made to Salina for charity events, for fundraisers, to give clinics, or just to make an appearance on junior golf day. And also, what a good friend he is. Everybody should be so lucky to have a friend like Bryan Norton. And you can go on and on about his playing career, but Bryan had quite an influence on me as a teacher. Not so much as a player, mind you. It's actually, it's hard to have confidence when you play a lot of golf with Bryan Norton. About the time my confidence level would start getting up to a peak, I'd be in for another beatdown from Bryan Norton. And after a while, you're just like, yeah, I got nothing. So But, you know, when we were kids, it was easy to see that he was the best around our area. But over the years, he proved he was the best around in the country also. And he proved that on many occasions. But to do it with the character and class that he had was quite an accomplishment. But I've already probably exceeded my time limit. Let me conclude just by saying, Bryan, congratulations on a great career, for your leadership with the foundation, all you've done for junior golf in Kansas. And I've known a lot of those kids who have gotten those scholarships, and it was a big deal to them. So thank you for all of that work. And thank you for the help you've given me, your influence on my teaching over the years. I cherished our conversations, especially when you were a tour player, when we go to the range. And, you know, Bryan lists me as swing coach. That's not completely accurate. Nobody's really Bryan's swing coach. Well, maybe Rob, but anyway, it was more just we would share discussions about the golf swing, the things he had learned and the things he was doing in his swing, competitive golf at the highest level, his mental approach to the game. They meant a lot to me, and I used a lot of it in my teaching over the years. Probably should have given you some kind of cut over the years out of that, but don't look for that check, by the way. He knows me well too. So anyway, so thank you for all of the years of our friendship, our opportunity to share the game that we love, and for being a treasured friend.
Golf has changed my life.
Johnny Miller once said, "I don't think anywhere is there a symbiotic relationship between caddy and player like there is in golf." That seems to describe the relationship between Bryan and his longtime caddy, Peter Shriver. Peter and Bryan met back in the 90s, and Peter's been caddying for him ever since. Please welcome tonight's Kansas Golf Hall of Fame inductor, Peter Shriver.
Thank you and good evening, and I agree with everybody else. It's a pleasure to be a part of this. I'll probably knock this off. The one thing that, when you look at Bryan's bio, and I'm really glad that this was highlighted, is the fact that he has qualified for 27 USGA events. And more specifically, if you think about it, he has qualified, which is really hard to do. There's people in this room that have tried to qualify for USGA events and haven't done it, and there's people that's tried and have done it. But not only does he do it, when he shows up in an event like Mike, he's there to win, and he's one of the guys that people look at. And one of the things, so I've been fortunate enough to go to 17 of those 27 USGA events with Bryan. And there's 3 things that I learned from doing that. And the first one is you realize how good the players are across the country. I mean, when Mike McCoy was standing up here, Mike McCoy is damn good. And you get to a tournament and there's a whole bunch of guys, 100 and some odd guys, but there's really 30 guys, 25 guys that have a legitimate shot. And tonight you're going to hear from 2 of them. And so that's the first thing you realize is how good these fields are. The second thing you realize is how hard it is to win. And you have to kind of learn to accept the fact that winning might mean consistently making a cut or getting to the 16, making match play, winning a match or 2. It is harder than hell to win. And I was so happy that she mentioned the fact that Bryan led a great Kansas team out at Mayakama, and not only did the team win, and Bryan was the anchor of that team, but for those of you who don't know, every state sends 3 guys to that tournament, and so does Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. And Bryan Norton shot the lowest score of everybody there, and that makes him a USGA champion. And you just don't know how hard that is and how significant that is. But the third thing that you learn about somebody when you've spent 20 plus years like I have with this guy is, golf is a hard game, right? And you face more defeat than victory and more disappointment than happiness. And there's so many ups and downs, and these guys work so hard. And you learn about their character. And if you don't remember anything else that's said here tonight, remember this. Bryan Norton is a great player. He's a really damn good golfer, but he is a better person. And the state of Kansas should be very, very happy and proud of the fact that he is in their Hall of Fame. So how did I meet Bryan Norton? Well, I'm working at Commerce Bank back in the mid-1990s, and my boss, Kevin Abarth, comes to me and he says, "Hey man, I need you to find a celebrity to play in our customer golf outing." And I'm new to town because I hadn't moved here from Phoenix. And so I'm like, well, I don't know, I'm not sure what to do. So I tried the normal suspects. I tried the radio guys, the TV guys, athletes. Well, it turns out the Kansas City Chiefs are having an event the same day the Commerce Bank is having their event. And so I'm kind of screwed, right? So there's a guy named Dan Bolin that's sitting in this room. So Dan Bolin at the time was head of the Commerce Trust Company. And he had heard through the grapevine that I was kind of up a creek. So Dan comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, big guy. Big guy." And I'm like, "Why do you call me big guy all the time? You call me big guy tonight." I don't think Dan Bolin knows my name, but he's like, I heard you need a celebrity to play in this golf tournament. He's like, "I know this guy named Bryan Norton. He just came off playing professional golf. He's a great guy. He'll have great stories, and he'll be fantastic." And I'm like, if the dude can break 80, I'll take it, right? And so I'll never forget meeting Bryan for the first time. I met him at Jack Stack Barbecue on the plaza, and I was waiting for him, and he comes in. He had just joined Lockton. And he's wearing a nice crisp white shirt like Dan Bolin is tonight. And he's got a pair of suit pants on and a pretty nice tie. And the ensemble was completed by these cheesy brown braided leather braces. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. But it didn't take long to realize how good of a guy Bryan Norton was. He was a great guy. We hit it off. Shortly thereafter, I started caddying for him, and it just was great. So as people mention, you know, what's the best experience? What's kind of the worst experience? What's something about Bryan Norton that you don't know? The best experience by far was the 2009 U.S. Senior Open, and it was a great trip up at Crooked Stick. First of all, we did a road trip, and Bryan's whole family was there. Like I said, Bryan finished tied for 19th, and it was cool because, I mean, some funny things happened along the way. As we're driving, we go through St. Louis, and we have to go to the John. So we stop at this truck stop to go to the John, right? So we go in this bathroom, and there's a urinal that's looking me right in the face. I mean, it's the world's tallest urinal. And so I said, Bryan, you got to come in here and see this. It's the world's tallest urinal. So we got to see the world's tallest urinal. We get in the car, and we drive up north, and we get to Effingham, Illinois. And I mean, if you guys have probably seen this, but out of nowhere is the world's largest cross. And it comes up, boom, it's just like right there. But I think what Bryan said was something to the effect of, my God, Dr. Evil has landed, and you know, he's in this cross. There's no church associated with the cross, it's just a cross. So we roll into Effingham, and we're going to stop and eat something. And the gal who's waiting on our table, she's a young gal, and I said, I got to ask you, what is up with this cross? And if you've seen the movie Young Frankenstein, when Dr. Frankenstein asks Igor about his hump on his back that's moved, she literally looks at us like, what cross? I mean, this is the biggest freaking cross you've ever seen. So we get to the Senior Open. Bryan plays great, tied for 19th. The cool thing was he got to play with Hale Irwin the last 2 days. And there were two things about Bryan Norton that bamboozled Hale Irwin. First was the fact that Bryan Norton made 13 birdies in 2 days over that weekend, 8 on Saturday and 5 on Sunday. And the second was Bryan Norton carried 2 putters. And he would use a short putter for long putts and his long putter for short putts. And you could just see in Hale Irwin's face, he didn't get it. He was just like, what the hell is this guy doing? And so I guess when they were signing the scorecard, Bryan told me, he said, Hale Irwin said, would you please explain this whole putter thing? And Bryan explains it to him. Then he says, no, what business are you in again? And Bryan says, I'm in the insurance business. And Hale says, well, why don't you go back to doing that? So that was the best experience. Probably the most unusual experience is 2014 Conway Farms. This is a U.S. Mid-Am. And occasionally Bryan will call me before an event. And when Bryan calls me before an event, it's usually not good news. Case in point, a month and a half ago he calls me. We're getting ready to go to Detroit to the U.S. Senior Am. And he's like, hey, big guy. I said, what? He said, I cut off part of my finger. And I'm like, well, that's bad news. And so in 2014, I get one of those calls. And I'm rolling into the bank parking garage, and he calls me, and he says, hey, big guy, I got bad news. And I said, what's wrong? He said, well, my back's out. I said, what's wrong with your back? Because I have a bad back, so I mean, I get it. He said, well, it's my sciatica. I said, Bryan, that's bad news. I said, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to go to the doctor, and the doctor said he can give me some medication. So we go up to Conway Farms after Bryan sees the doctor, and we get to the course, and the protocol is, you know, Bryan goes in and checks in. I go in and check in. I meet him on the range. He hits one golf ball on the range, turns to me, and he says, I can't do this. I'm like, can't do what? He said, I can't play. My back is just jacked up. And I said, well, did the doctor say you could hurt it any worse? And he said, no. I said, do you have any of those pills that he gave you? And he said, yeah. I said, where are they? He said, they're in the bag. So I get out. I said, take half a pill. Let's wait about 20 minutes, and then we'll see how it goes. And he ends up being able to play a practice round. The next day is the first day of qualifying, takes half a pill, goes out, and I think he played great. I think you're in the top 5, 7 players. Second round, takes half a pill. We go out, tees off on number 1, hits it right down the middle. It's got a wedge into the green, hits it on the green, 3 putts. Second hole is par 3, I believe. Makes a mess of number 2. And I can tell something just isn't right. And so I'm sitting there on the 3rd tee trying to play caddy thinking, what the heck am I going to say to this guy? So I said, look, man, let's just forget everything that's happened. Let's pretend like we are on the 1st tee again. And the last lucid thing he said to me was, you know what, that's a good idea, big guy. And so I don't remember what happened the next 16 holes. I just remember he didn't make the cut, and we were on our way home. And when I got back home, I looked up the side effects of prescription meds, and Bryan Norton's scorecard from Conway Farms was right there on the internet. Whatever you know about this stuff, it's for real. Here's one thing you don't know about Bryan Norton. At the same time, he is the best driver of an automobile, and he's the worst driver of an automobile. This guy has internal GPS like you can't believe. I mean, we can get to a course, and I'll usually map quest it to get there, but to get home, to go to dinner, he just knows where to go, in cities that we've never been to before. I mean, it's insane. But the flip side of it is, he can't just drive. He has to be doing something else. I have seen him on his iPad while he's driving, and he's driving with his knees. He used to have this BlackBerry that he's on, and we're going off the road, we're going on the road. And it all just kind of came to a halt when we were coming back from Nebraska from a U.S. Open qualifier. And we're flying down I-35. He's on his iPad, driving with his knees. I look up, and there's a semi that's in front of us that is not going as fast as we are. And our closing speed was pretty impressive. And I just yelled top of my lungs, his name. And I'm like, dude, we're not doing this anymore. Okay? Either I'm going to drive or you're going to pay attention. So let me conclude this way. None of us accomplish anything in this world without support. And Bryan Norton, when I look out in this room and I see all the friends that he has and the family that he has, it just blows my mind. And Bryan, at least what I have seen, has had tremendous support throughout the 20 plus years. He's got 3 great kids. Their mom, Julie, was very supportive. Her mom was extremely supportive. Bryan's parents were fantastic, as were his brothers and sisters. And the only regret, and somebody else mentioned this, and I think Bryan would agree, is that Bryan's father can't be here to witness this, because I know he would be so proud. And I think he would echo what everybody else has said, is that not only is this Hall of Fame getting a really, really good player, but they're getting an even better person. And Bryan, I just want to personally thank you for letting me be a small part of the journey.
Bryan, come on up and accept your award.
One thing my family's hoping right now is I'm not going to be as emotional as I was at my father's funeral, because it took me about 3 minutes to get started that day at least. But this is a very emotional evening for me, and it's so wonderful to see so many friends in the audience that I go back to my first memories with all the Salina guys here up front, and so many friends from here at Mission Hills Country Club and my office, but most importantly, my family right up here in front. And I'm sad Danielle couldn't be here. I had no idea she'd just recorded an interview for this. Had no idea that some of my teammates, that Mike McCoy, but so special to have my family, which is all over the country, here tonight. So thank you, you all. Okay, real quick, I want to round out a couple of those stories. I was on opioids, and I shot 49 the front 9 the second day. I shot 71 the first day. We had an afternoon tee time, trying to get the opioid balance just right for a 7:20 tee time. It's hard. I was up at 4:45 on the treadmill, just trying to figure this whole thing out. It was a total disaster. Mike, I'm sure you were at Conway Farms. The course wasn't that hard, trust me. It wasn't 49 on the front 9 hard. The X-Lax story, okay. I got my naive nature from my mother. It wasn't from Frank, it was from Jean. And freshman year, typical, different diet. Mom always cooked me all these balanced diets, and I'm eating everything in sight in the jock dorm. And so run into a little constipation issue. And all my teammates, who were much more worldly than me, said, well, Bryan, you should go get a box of X-Lax. So I go and get a box of X-Lax. And they see me, they're just like, they saw this thing coming a long way away. And they're like, Bryan, it's a lot more effective if you just eat the whole damn box. And I'm like, seriously? Like, no side effects? Gene Norton, ding, 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 And so I literally didn't leave the restroom for 24 hours. It was like, never left. It was crazy. It's so funny. Danielle mentioned something in her little speech. I tried to write some notes, but the pens ran out of ink, so I'm going to try to get through this. But she mentioned something that was so spot on. That was such a special week, and it was the first time my kids had ever really watched me play a golf tournament. It was 2009. They were at a certain age. And I was so nervous on the first tee, not to hit my shot, but because I knew they were arriving anytime. And the first tee at Crooked Stick is like right next to the entry gate. And I was standing on the first tee, and all I could focus on was the entry gate. And I knew they were getting there anytime. And they came running up and charging in, and it was my turn to hit. And I just started bawling. I couldn't hit it. I was so excited that my kids, because I told them about being a pro golfer, but I'm playing in a pro golf tournament. Even though I was an amateur, I was a locked-in producer, it still felt like the old days. I knew all the players in the field because it was all the guys I played pro golf with. So I knew all the European guys from when I played in Europe. I knew all the PGA Tour guys. And it just was such a proud moment for me to get to share that with the kids and the family. And everybody was there, everybody from my dad to Julie's mom and all points in between. And it was just the most special week. One of the things that was said was how one of the great moments of my golf life was winning the Kansas parent-child or father-son with Johnny. And one of my absolute best memories of that was the very first year. Johnny had an injury that year and he couldn't play high school golf. And this was his first tournament of the year. He'd heard it at spring break, and so he'd been out all year. It's the end of August. And we go to Lawrence Country Club, and I really wanted to win. I really wanted to win with him. So I was more nervous and more on edge than I normally get for a golf tournament. And the first 6 holes, I think Johnny was equally nervous, but more, he just was rusty. He hadn't hit a golf shot. Like, I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, we're playing with a college All-American, Thane Ringler, and his dad. And I'm like, and I'm hanging on, I'm kind of scraping out a bunch of pars and stuff. And finally I look at Johnny on the 7th hole, and I'm like, Johnny, you got to show up. And right at that moment, the beer cart girl's driving by. This is a true story. Johnny's 17. I said, if I buy you a bunch of beers, would you drink them? And he goes, well, you're going to tell Mom? And I said, that's what I'm asking you. Are you going to tell Mom? And he goes, no. I bought him 3 beers. He chugged them down, the 17-year-old, and next thing you know, he's piping it. It was awesome. It was awesome. And that is a true story. Finally, on the 8th tee, he got those beers, and he calmed down, and I calmed down. We started making birdies, and we ended up winning by 2 the next day, which the other funny story was we get to the last hole, we're winning by 2. Really, all we got to do is get a ball in play. And the 18th hole at Lawrence Country Club is scary. And I say, Johnny, you are awesome with that Stinger 2-iron. And he goes, Dad, the driver's the best club in my bag. And he pegs it, and he smokes it, and he hit it right over Richard Consum's house, which is 100 yards out of bounds. This ball was out of bounds as soon as it left the club face. And I'm sitting there going, first of all, thank you for not blaming me, Johnny, for you hitting that shot, for planting the seed. But I teed up my ball, which I hit a 2-iron, and my ball was airborne before his landed. I was so nervous. I'm like, I'm not thinking anymore. It's like pegged it, got it in play, and we ended up winning by 2. But that was such a great memory. Well, now I'm going to talk about the stuff I came here to talk about tonight, because I had to touch up on some of those stories. But, all right, so much of my background in golf just goes back to the whole Salina thing. And it was just the most giant blessing. My dad was not a golfer. And for us to move right next to the first tee in a small town of a golf course, and small town golf courses were different back then than bigger towns, because you didn't really have to play with a parent. I was 6 years old. I'd just walk over there and start playing. And you wouldn't be able to do that in a city. But in Salina, you could do that. And I was just this curious, hyperactive little kid who just started going to the golf course. And I never stopped going. And thankfully, all these guys that are in the room were going too. And they were really good. So in Salina, we had the 2 best, as it turns out, it wasn't when I was 6, but later on, we had the 2 best high school teams in the state, any class size. We'd beat all the Wichita schools, we'd beat all the Kansas City schools. And it's the guys in this room and some guys that aren't in this room that Steve Brown called me today. I mean, he's this giant 6'7" guy who could wedge it and putt it better than me. It was embarrassing that a giant man like that could hit it 100 yards farther and he could putt it better. I never thought I could ever beat that guy. And John Norton, who's back in the back of the room, and Randy, they all went to the other high school. Selena, I know you thought he went to Central. He went to South. They were the enemy. But you know, it's kind of like the best of friends enemies. I mean, we were good, and we competed hard, and we loved each other, and we were the different, you know, there's a lot of crossover in where everybody played, but it was that competition growing up and that camaraderie, the fact that everybody was doing it all the time and we were doing it at a really high level. And it just was, you know, it was luck. I mean, there's so much fate that gets involved in life, and me moving right there and getting to meet all these guys. Grover, we were playing golf when we were little kids, and there's this Bob Kennedy, who I just adored growing up. He was 2 years older than me, and he lettered at Notre Dame when he was in college. And there were so many good players, and it was fun. I always think of Hubert. You know, we'd go play kind of the last 9 of the day, and we would identify as PGA Tour players. And of course, we all wanted to be Nicklaus or Palmer or Watson, and Hugh wanted to be Tom Pertzer because he had a funny name. You know, it was that kind of fun and camaraderie and just the fondest of memories. And so you guys, it just, you know, we all have had such fun journeys, but it all started with that. So happy that you all are here. Okay, what a thrill for me tonight that my Oral Roberts teammates and coach were on the video. I would love for them to have been here. They're very dear friends. My coach, I believe it was 3 years ago, was the oldest coach in D1. I mean, he's coaching me in 1977, and he was coaching in 2018. I mean, do the math. But he's always been a super youthful guy. He was about 30 or 32 when I played college golf, and he was a great leader. But the accomplishments of that group of people, you know, changed the trajectory. You know, changed my trajectory that I had this great group growing up, and they were competitive. It changed the trajectory when I got around these way bigger, more ambitious thinkers than me when I got to college. And, you know, I mean, those guys were on the screen, but let me tell you how good those guys were. Joey Rassett, who was on there in college, played in 3 U.S. Opens and a Masters, was a semifinalist in the U.S. Amateur, and was the runner-up college player of the year my senior year. Jim Kane won 2 Oklahoma amateurs, won 2 Broadmoor amateurs when it was one of the 5 biggest amateur tournaments in the country. Was runner-up in the California amateur to Bob Clampett. Bill Glasson won 7 times on the PGA Tour. Mark Tender was another teammate. He played in the U.S. Open when he was 17 years old, back when that never happened. He played at 1976 U.S. Open. Mike Hewitt's won 25 Oklahoma Golf Association championships. He's got the all-time record. Those were just some of the guys on the team. I mean, it was the worst we played, and the worst we finished in NCAA in those 4 years was 6th. We finished 6th, 3rd, 2nd. And I bring it up because what was really cool is we came in just as a bunch of really raw freshmen, but Joey was the total leader of the team. And he kept saying, we're winning the NCAA. I don't know what you guys are here for. And I was sitting there going, I just want to play in the NCAA. And, Joey just set the tone. And Mike McCoy referred to it, getting around guys that have had success and having them tell you, this is possible. It's not just, hey, maybe that'd be a good goal. It's like, hey, just so you know, this is what's happening. So get on board. It changed my life. And, my freshman year, he went and qualified for the U.S. Open after, that summer after our freshman year. And all of a sudden I'm like, maybe I could qualify for the U.S. Open. Next thing you know, I qualified for 2 U.S. Opens when I was in college. Shaddy O drove his Datsun B210 all the way to Baltusrol to attend one of them. I gave him 12 dozen golf balls, and he sold them to Wally Beats for $144 to pay for the gas money. I remember that. Then he got a veteran to buy his drinks in a bar one night in New Jersey, so it was awesome. The last thing I'll say about being around good players is I'm a member of this country club, and there are so many good players at this country club. And I've been here the last 23 years, and we got a table full of them in the back there with Sid McKnight, and Brooksy's back there, and Jigger, such a great player, and Doug Albers reached out to me today and telling me he wished he could be here, and David Rissmiller is a fantastic player, and Rob Park before he moved away. I mean, all these guys have done big things in golf, and with some of them I'm older, and so it was fun for me. I could try to help them, see bigger things too, and try to have some USGA goals, but we, just again, the theme is just guys pushing you to be better, and so I've just my whole life been blessed with that. Okay, I want to mention a few mentors. So first and foremost, I didn't know that picture was going to be up there, but Wally Beats and Randy Searing, just going back to the Salina theme. Wally wasn't like some well-known teacher, but he was just a great life mentor. He did it all right, and he did it with a light spirit, and I just always loved his tone, and when I saw Randy here tonight, we loved to say, all right, because that's what Wally did, and, all right, how you been, and to this day, we still, say that when we see each other. And Randy's 2 years older than me, and he's just been, such a great mentor of mine and with me. We've shared a lot of things together, and I've always been so impressed with his thirst for knowledge of the golf swing, and so it's been so fun over the years just to talk about what the latest swing theory is and what works and what doesn't work under pressure, even though it looks like it works on the range. So it's been a great ride, Randy. There's been 3 primary mentors that I want to point out from when I was younger. One of them was my high school golf coach, and his name's Chris Crank. And Chris was a great player in his own right. He was just probably in his late 30s when he coached us, or mid 30s. But most importantly, and you'll hear this theme for a little bit, he was from Muskogee, Oklahoma. And when you grow up in Kansas, you try to be good, but Oklahoma, golf in Oklahoma is like football is in Oklahoma. I mean, it is a giant deal. And Oklahomans have very high aspirations. They think about winning national championships. And so very early on, Chris was from Muskogee, and he would tell stories of, his best friend in high school is Bob Dixon. Bob Dixon won the US Am and the British Am in the same year, 1967. And it just kind of changed my vision of things, hearing about guys that were that good and that it's achievable and you can think that big. Again, I'm getting back to this theme. And so Chris, great player himself, he was a firecracker, that's for sure. I mean, you could hardly listen to half the stuff he said. He was just kind of a good old boy from Oklahoma, and we all rolled our eyes like high school kids always do with adults. But, you know, some of it did sink in, and he was an inspiration. There was also another guy named Joey Dills from Muskogee who wasn't that much older than me, but he played at BYU and was a very accomplished player. My funniest story about Chris was I had this crazy good freshman year in high school where like I shot that 66 at Cary Park and won a bunch of tournaments. And Chris was from Oklahoma, and he goes, you know, the Trans-Miss is down in Oklahoma this summer. I'm going to go down there. And I'm like, well, I want to go. And he's like, well, you can't get in. You know, you're 15. I'm like, well, I'm going to write him a letter, and I'm going to get in. He goes, well, if you get in, I'll take you with me. And I'm like, well, I knew my parents weren't taking me, and I couldn't drive yet, so that was my ticket. So I wrote him 1,000 letters to the Trans-Miss Golf Association, and I got in the Trans-Miss. It was at Southern Hills and Cedar Ridge. At the last minute, he goes, I'm not taking you with me. I never thought you would get in that tournament. So I had to withdraw because I didn't have a ride to Tulsa. But it was so funny. He thought, this kid's not getting in. But he did make it up to me. My senior year, a few years later, they started this tournament that didn't last very long, but each state sent their best high school player to a national tournament where you just played, you know, the best players from around the country. And I didn't win the state high school, but I had a great playing record that year. And Chris lobbied for me to be the representative, and he took me to Williamsburg, Virginia. We drove, and we went all the way to Williamsburg, and I got beat on the 72nd hole and finished second in that thing. And so he more than made it up to me. And very, very dear part of my heart is for Chris. He had a big vision for a high school golf coach. The next guy, and Grover knows this guy's name's Labron Harris, and he was a legendary golf coach at Oklahoma State University, and he had a really good camp. It was hard to get into. And I tried when I was 15 and didn't get in. I just was late getting on it. But when I was 16 and 17, I went, and Grover went, and a guy named David Bingston, who was going to be here tonight, and he didn't feel well this morning. I thought it was smart for him not to come in the age of COVID. But we all went down there together. Bingston's went the first year. I think Grover went the second year with me. And that again, you know, it was in Oklahoma, and I'll never forget, you'd go, I mean, it was the dustiest Muni golf course called Lakeside in Stillwater. This was way before Karsten Creek, and it was a total dump. But they had this tiny little shack with a clubhouse, but it had 1 million All-American plaques in it for all the Oklahoma State players. And of every bit of memorabilia that's out on that table, the two things I'm actually most proud of is being an All-American, because I looked at those and I'm like, I want my name on one of those plaques someday. And I'd make an excuse just to go to the clubhouse and stare at those plaques and look at the names on there and all the great players. And these Oklahoma State guys, you know, Oklahoma State, to people who don't know this, is as good at college golf as Alabama is at college football. I mean, they've been dominant for 50 years. And they rank number one most every year at some point. You know, they got upset last year at the national championship, ranked number one most of the year. And Labron Harris was just, he was super nice to me. He tried to help me every way he could. And the biggest way he ended up helping me is he let me be a counselor when I was too old to be in the camp, when I was 18. So this was the third year. I went down there and I was a counselor that summer. And I'll never forget, I went down there, and, you know, back in those days, you know, everybody worked their tail off too. And I was throwing hay that summer for my dad. You know, my sisters that are here know, you know, if you're a kid of Frank Norton, you're going to work your ass off, even if you think you're a good athlete. So I'm throwing hay the week before I'm going to be a camp counselor, and 2 weeks before I'm going to the Western Junior. And I was so stiff when I got down to this camp, I couldn't even swing a golf club. And it just so happened that Bill Brogdon, who became my college golf coach, came over to that camp. And I was supposed to go to the University of Kansas and play on the golf team. I'd gone on all these recruiting trips and nothing, it just didn't feel like there was a guy I could play for. and I was kind of at the end of my rope. I'd gone everywhere from LSU to OU. Oklahoma State wasn't recruiting me. Miami of Ohio, Houston, I went everywhere, and nothing really was a good fit for me. But I was at Oklahoma State golf camp as a counselor, and Bill Brogdon came over just to talk to Labron, learn a little bit about the camp. But Labron had called him and said, there's this really good player over here that you need to take a look at. And I instantly loved Bill Brogdon. He was young and hip and fun and handsome, and he just sold me on his vision in 5 minutes. And anyway, I had signed only a Big 8 letter of intent at the University of Kansas, and so I wasn't tied up nationally. So I immediately called the coach at KU, and he wanted to kill me. But I ended up going a month later to Oral Roberts, and that really changed the trajectory of the rest of my life. One other person I want to put in under the mentorship category, and he's here tonight, but Bill Frick, when I first started at Lockton, is the one that kept hammering me about becoming an amateur again. He said, and I told this to the Lockton guys, I don't think he saw much in me as a producer at Lockton, but he thought, if you're going to have any chance, you better become a good amateur player, and maybe you can get somebody's attention that way. But he really was a great mentor, all kidding aside, and took me under his wing. He was Grover's mentor years before that. He was really good at sitting you down, talking to you about strategy, and really kind of plotting out, a good path. And one of the things that he kept telling me is, you got to apply. And this was 3 years after I'd quit playing for a living. And so, within a month of starting at Lockton, I applied to the USGA, and they made me sit another 3 years. And so I had a 6-year lull in playing, but that was fine. I kind of needed that to kind of just get cleansed from all that I'd put into it as a pro. You get super burned out, and so it was great. I'd started a family. Alexandria was around, and Danielle was 1 year old at the time that I started at Lockton, and Johnny was on the way. So it was perfect. And Bill, I saw you here tonight and let you know you were in my speech, so I appreciate that mentorship. And then the last guy is my dad. And I mentioned this before. He was not a golfer. It was so funny. And thank God my mom was there, because my dad would say sports are a waste of time and golf's a waste of time. And it's just an excuse to not work. And mom was more the cheerleader type. She'd say, Frank, leave him alone. And just, he's good. So let him do this. And so mom had my back when dad thought it was just, dad never did anything athletically in terms of competition. He became actually a great athlete as he grew older. He became just a rigorous fitness guy. But at the time he wasn't. When he was younger, he was overweight and didn't exercise and didn't eat right and smoked a lot. And he changed a lot. And mom having my back just is what allowed me to be kind of running around that country club for 10 hours a day playing golf. But I learned so much from my dad. And, people have always said, you're competitive. I don't feel like I'm that competitive. I think, I'm a really nice guy who is willing to just play my cards, and hopefully it works out. But, as I think about my dad, I know my dad was competitive, but he was competitive in a different way too. And I think this is how I'm competitive. He was competitive in that he could grind it out forever. He was incredibly disciplined. That guy got up and he did it right every day. And his consistency was amazing. His preparation and consistency. And that's the way he was competitive. And he hated to lose. The law profession's different than golf. Dad, you gotta learn. You lose a lot in golf. And one of my favorite stories, and I told this at my dad's funeral, and a few of you have heard it, but Dad didn't know anything about golf, but he came to the U.S. Boys Junior. I'd qualified when I was 17. It was in the Denver area at Highwan Country Club. And I'd played really good in the first 2 rounds and qualified 12th and had a nice high seed. So I'm playing this guy it was actually his home course. He was from Evergreen, Colorado, and had a tough match. I was behind the whole time. and ended up losing on the 16th hole. And I shook his hand, and we all walked in from 16, and walking with my mom and Eve and my dad. My dad won't talk to me. He's mad. And so we kind of have lunch in the clubhouse, and he still won't talk to me. So then we kind of part ways because I was staying somewhere else because they'd come after the tournament started, and then we all met up for dinner. And he was still very quiet, and I looked at Eve, and I said, Eve, what's going on with Dad? And she's like, he's pissed. And I said, why is he so upset? Because you quit. You quit playing after 16. It was the Roberto Duran, no mas moment. And I looked at my dad and I said, oh, Dad, are you mad because I quit playing after 16? He goes, yeah, mad, you quit. I go, Dad, it's called match play. When you're 3 behind with 2 to play, you're eliminated. And he was like, oh, I'm so happy. And he hugged me. You didn't quit. He was competitive, but he didn't know anything about golf, clearly. But, to my own credit, to a certain extent, one thing that I have always felt very proud about is I just became very determined to change his outlook on golf. And when I was a junior in college, I qualified for the U.S. Open at Baltusrol. It was a super famous U.S. Open. Jack Nicklaus set the scoring record and beat Aoki, right at the end. And it was so exciting. The atmosphere at Baltusrol is amazing. The setting's amazing. And I'm just a kid there and was so excited. And I took my dad with me. And then Monty shows up with a bunch of friends. And it was a total blast. And what I loved about that tournament is Dad loved to observe people. He's really curious. And when he did do something, he's a workaholic, but when he wasn't at work, he could just totally zone in on whatever you were doing, and he would pay attention. And I'll never forget that during that tournament at some point during the week, and I missed the cut, and I was in over my head, but he said, son, I've changed my opinion of golf. And I said, how's that, Dad? And he said, well, I've been watching all these great players, Jack Nicklaus and all these other wonderful players, and they work as hard at their craft as I work at mine. And I've changed how I feel about this game. And I'll never forget that. And it was such a blessing for me. It kind of released me to invest maybe even a little bit more of myself into it. But that was really the first time I'd taken him with me. I was 1980, and I can't tell you how many stories. A lot of times it was USGA events, and Peter and I and Dad would go. And the year Crooked Stick, when everybody went, I took him to St. Andrews to the 2003 British Mid-Am, and he went all over the world with me when he would take time off from work, and we had a total blast. And I know I changed him. He was a guy who was very locked in on Salina and work and blah blah blah, and he changed over the years, and it really made me feel great. And the other thing he loved is, he loved education, and so his favorite thing to do is to go with me to wherever Alexandria, Danielle, and Johnny were in college, and we'd go spend time, and he just would do everything on Parents' Weekend. He'd do everything in the program. He'd go sign up for everything and learn as much as he could about the school. And so it's just such a blessing. I love that all those years later, after him battling me every moment and Mom protecting me, then all of a sudden Dad loved every minute of it, and he was there kind of every step of the way. I'm going to finish with this, and I'm just going to say my proudest moment, my favorite moment, I agree, is that 2009 Senior Open, just because of all the people that were there and the family. But my proudest moment was the 2010 U.S. State Team Championship. It's I was in contention a lot of times over the years in USGA National Championships, and Mike knows it's hard to win national championships. And Mike's won the U.S. Mid-Amateur, and so he's a national champion. And I'll never forget, the most embarrassing thing to me was that Kansas would do so poorly in the state team. We would finish between 40th and 50th every time. And so starting in 2003, they had a champions dinner at the Kansas Amateur every year. And I would show up and I would get up front and I would say, we're so much better than we're showing. And I've played all over the world and I've played against the best players. You guys are so much better than you realize. I was taking a page out of my old college teammates' book, Joey Rassett, who just was like, we can do this, we can win. And my problem was I couldn't get on the team. And it wasn't because I wasn't good enough, but they had a point system that just rewarded the guys who played the most tournaments. And I kept talking to Kim Ritchie, who was running the association, saying, Kim, you're setting us up for failure here. We can't take guys there that aren't good, that just because they played 25 Kansas Golf Association events every year. And I couldn't get it changed. I mean, in 2003, I was runner-up in the U.S. Mid-Amateur, and I was medalist in the British Mid-Amateur, and I wasn't on our team. And so I'm just like, what do you got to do to get on the team? And but those weren't point earning events, Well, you got to play the state line, event over there. And so anyway, finally in 2009, Kim Ritchie changed the system, and it was a pure selection deal. And myself and John Troutman and Dodge Kimmer went to St. Louis for the U.S. State Team Championship. Trust me, I was the dog on this team. I mean, Dodge and John, the first round shot 64-67. It's all-time best round shot by any state in any round in the U.S. state team. And we had a 5-shot lead on Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania had the College Player of the Year, and they had Sean Knapp, who won the Senior U.S. Amateur a couple years ago, and they had Nathan Smith, who's won 6 national championships. And we were kicking their tail. Second day, we had tough luck. We played in the morning when it poured, and in the afternoon, it was kind of like today here. It poured in the morning, it was perfect in the afternoon, and they lapped us. They beat us by 12 or 13 that day. We had to count a 75 and a 77 in a pouring rain. The next day, we shot 67 and 68 and nearly came back and won. We finished second. We finished 2 or 3 behind, and it was just we'd gone so far behind that middle day, and I was so mad. But we'd gone from 40th to 2nd, and we called Kim on the way home, and we're excited about how we'd finished. But, I'd been on a second-place finishing team in the NCAA, and I'd been runner-up in the U.S. Mid-Am at that point. So it was just a bittersweet taste, but we caught a break. They announced at the tournament that they were playing again the next year. Usually they play it every 2 years. But the next year they were going to split the men's and the women's state championship, make them opposite years. And so they said, we're going to play the men again next year. And I was on the warpath for 12 months with our guys, our best players, saying, we're going to send another good team, and we're going to win next year. And the next year, I'll never forget, it was in wine country in California. And we pulled up, and we went in and registered, and the USGA media guy looked at me and said, well, you don't have your big guns here. You don't have Troutman and Dodge Kimmer. You guys have a chance this year? And I remember it just infuriated me. And I said, we got a really good team this year. And it was Tyler Shelton, who we all know is a great player, and Charlie Stevens from Wichita is a great player. And I felt like I was a great player. And lo and behold, we won by 4 shots. I looked the other day, I looked at the results. There's 25 national champions in that field. 22 have won USGA national championships, and 3 of them have won RNA national championships. It was a stacked field. And we were the oldest team in the field. This tournament has everything from high school players to senior guys. And I was 51 at the time, and Charlie was in his 40s, and Tyler was in his 40s. And by God, we went and won that thing by 4 shots. And I will tell you, it was like a page out of Joey's playbook in college where he kept saying, we're winning the NCAA. And I just wanted to win this thing so bad. And I love team events where you share it together. And that's my fondest memory. And I thank Kim for changing the point system to where he would take the best players instead of the most active players. And I just love those teammates of mine that just stood up at Mayakama and played great. So anyway, with that, I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I just, again, want to thank my family for flying in. There were people stuck on the tarmac today. Laura's flight was delayed yesterday. It's just crazy. And we're way past Mom's bedtime, and she's still up and smiling. So I just thank you, everybody here. It's just, there's so much love in this room, and I feel it from all of you all, and it means so much to me that you're here tonight. Thank you.
Well, hey, thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. On behalf of the Kansas Golf Foundation, I do want to thank our sponsors, Lockton, Frank Kirk, the Mission Hills staff, and Dana Sterner, the event coordinator, Mike, Randy, and Peter, our speakers, Brian's family, our great photographer, Jim Loads, Ron Witten for writing the article in tonight's program. Silent auction winners, if you could meet us down there, Bill Manus, Tracy James, the Emmets, Joe Manus, Mary Larson, and Ricky Zahner. Thank you.